Alright, I think it is, I can tell. There is absolutely no echo in here. So, there's a full-size polar bear on the floor. Long story how I got it, no I didn't kill it. First Nations hunter from Greenland harvested it years ago. I've got all legal documents for it in the picture. A couple wolves hanging up, a grizzly hanging up, put some more antlers on the wall. The curtains are up right here. And this room is very soundproof. But the original idea was to use that whole upper level out there to do the podcast there and have this as a guest room. And I think I will use this as my office editing room and a guest room, and I'm going to go heavy at that end of the upper level here in the shop to turn that into an absolute kick-ass, wicked podcast room. So we can have up to 4, 5, 6 people there. Alright? That's the plan. So, what day is it today? It is Thursday still. It's absolutely dumping rain before the long weekend, of course, right? All those anglers who want to go steelhead fishing are screwed. The rivers are going to be blown out. It's kind of a bummer. But I'm going to get some voices heard now, and this will be launching at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. Another quick note. So what I started to do was I made a page for this YouTube channel on my website, which I never do anything with. I don't know why. And I will start regularly putting emails on that website as well in case you want to do some reading, okay? What else? Melba's DNA study. I haven't checked, but I hope we're making progress on that. We really need to get that done. So hopefully, one of you, thousands of people want to throw down a 50 cents or a buck or whatever you can, and we will see that through. Okay? And I think that I've been in contact with various people, and I'm convinced that is a very substantial item that needs to be done to help us with our puzzle pieces and get truth out there. Truth that has been suppressed and squished by the dark sons of bitches. So we gotta win. Now if you hear the clunking, unless the horses banging their feed bucket off the wall right there. It's not a bad sound for me to hear. Don't mind it at all. Now, let's get some voices heard. Now listen to this. This is titled, Did I Backhand a Sasquatch? They Came Into My Camp. You know, I haven't read this. I don't know for sure. I never put eyes on it, and for good reason. I didn't want to see. I was too effing scared. My name is Brian Wilson. Feel free to use it. Had 2 years Army Ranger training. I never saw combat, but I trained with the very best. It's a long story. Had my fair share of weirdness in the wild. This one occasion, I'll never be able to forget. Much too terrifying than can be expressed with written words. Not something I'd like to repeat. I will say I'll not go camping way back out in the middle of nowhere again unless I have a firearm, an escape route, and a vehicle within a few feet of me. However, I've yet to bring myself to do so since this event happened to me some 25 to 30 years ago. So it's 25 to 30 years of life being stolen from you as far as I'm concerned. Stolen. And that makes me grind my gears. That was about 60 to 70 miles east of Portland, Oregon. A place called Bagby Hot Springs. Quite isolated. Once I discovered this place, I fell in love with it. It became my destination every weekend for 5 years. Perhaps I dealt with more than a couple. They are people. However, none were what I would call pleasant, unless you enjoy having 100-pound boulders and smaller rocks thrown at you. You guys imagine that, a 100-pound boulder sailing at your ass. I'm assuming that all my encounters were always with the same one since I visited the same location every weekend. Could not have been several more, it could have been several more for all I know. I've had similar experiences dozens of times. Could it be they developed a relationship of sorts with me? I did hold my one-sided conversations with them, stating my peaceful intentions, but this did not help in lessening my contact with them. The one thing I stated verbally in my mind every time was that I believed I also had a right to be there. And yes, you do. We all do. For all I know, throwing boulders and rocks is how they say hello, and their way of them letting you know who is dominant and telling you not to misbehave while in their territory. After all, I never was drug out of my tent and eaten, lol. That did not make me feel any more at ease though. They didn't want me to be around, period. That was made obvious. I basically said, F you, I'll do what I want. Which I had to reinforce one night when one, perhaps two, came in too close for my comfort. I accepted that they were close by, but never thought things could actually get physical. I could see somewhat, which was very rare for Oregon, because the moon was actually out that night. And I was laying flat on my back in a small, high-wind, tubular-style tent, about 3 foot by 3 foot by 7 feet, when I heard some breathing outside the tent less than 10 feet from me. I thought, holy shit, there's a bear in my camp. This is a place where lots of people frequented further up the trail, although not many hikers. The camp is a half a mile past the hot springs where some hot tubs were built in some rather nice enclosures. And historically speaking, it was considered a holy place where the different Indian tribes could gather in peace without weapons. Several more miles led back to the bottom of the mountain and the parking lot. I only met 2 other groups that actually slept there in 5 years, so I pretty much considered this my own little private getaway. Lots of privacy. Anyhow, it's after midnight. I'm laying there in my tent when I see this long shadow go over top of me. It's on my right. The shadow quickly went away. Then there was a weird gibberish sound on the left side of me about 10 feet away. It sounded like a person imitating a turkey, shaking their head back and forth while their tongue flapping around in their mouth. I'm thinking, what the F is that? I've been to the zoo a couple times, but I never heard a bear make that kind of noise. In fact, I've never heard a bear make any kind of noise at all. But this was more like a turkey gobble with words. That's when something on my right slowly started pushing down into the roof of my tent. It was very slow and seemed to be almost calculated. An intentional act of testing, like it was seeing if there was something inside. It forced the roof down until it was 6 inches from my face. That's when I realized this thing wasn't a snout. It looked like a clenched fist that was about 8 inches wide. I could see its knuckles. I was suddenly wide awake and freaking out in my mind at what was happening. I didn't dare make a noise. This was not a bear or a deer or a moose. I was in a state of shock when it withdrew. My first thought was to escape, but how far would that get me? What are my options? What is this thing? Whatever it was large, but I could not hear it breathing. What I don't understand is, why did it do it again? I can't wrap my brain around it. About 10 seconds later, it came in again. The second time, the shadow was much larger. A 16 to 18 inch wide face with about a 4 to 5 inch wide human-shaped flat nose, a chin, eye sockets, wide mouth, and thick eyebrows, with large forehead pressed into the tent roof and stopped about 2 feet from my face. It stopped and took in a big lungful of my scent. I never knew the meaning of terror before. This was no bear, and it was bent over top of me. Its lung capacity was huge. Whew, this is crazy. I thought if it were my time to die, I wasn't going to go without a fight. What else can I do? I was desperate. There was no escaping whatever this was. So I reared my back right arm, and I hit it, full power and full face across its nose. Wow. There was no escaping whatever this was. So I reared back my right arm and I hit it full power and full face across its nose. Full power and full face. He must have meant full force across its nose. This was all so freaking weird. I was in a horrible dream, except it was really happening. To say the least, whatever it was, it didn't appreciate it. It literally stumbled back a few steps and then threw a tantrum like a child would. It first let out what I describe as a very loud and high-pitched scream. How can I describe it? This sounded like a woman screaming. It was deafening. I swear I could feel my insides vibrate. Then I heard a second, much deeper roar on top of that scream. And that one was on my left. There were 2 of them. Lung capacities of these things were massive. That second one was clearly pissed off. The ground was shaking. It was stamping its feet. I got the sense as if the deep-voiced one had let something really stupid happen and it couldn't do anything directly to me. I can't explain it. My body was vibrating from the inside out. It was angry and very frustrated. I just effing lay there waiting for something to shred me. Something inside me told me to just be still. I'd done enough. The one on my left went around the front of the tent to the fire pit where all my gear was. It didn't immediately leave. It was growling with such a low pitch / frequency I'd never heard before. You could feel it. It sounded like, kind of like a lion. For the next 5 to 10 seconds or so, it proceeded to destroy my camp. All the metal items clanged as they were kicked or thrown. There was a loud thump on the ground, and the ground shook again. I never heard the high-pitched one leave. It kind of just disappeared. But not only did I hear the second one leave, but I could feel the ground shake with each step it took. And boy, was it pissed. It literally plowed through the smaller trees and underbrush. The ground trembled with each step as it continued to roar off into the distance. I heard a splash as it crossed into the river next to me. It must have been running about 30 miles per hour through thick vegetation. And how is that possible? In the morning, I discovered it had left a path of broken trees in its wake for what looked like 200 feet. It looked like 200 feet as it crossed the river and went back up to the next ridge line. It didn't go around or along the hill, but straight uphill in a straight line. What animal does that? Didn't get to sleep that night, but the next morning when the sun came up, I surveyed the damage. It tossed everything in camp. There was an 8-foot tree log with a 2-foot diameter I used as a bench that it threw about 20 feet. If it wanted to, it could have squashed me, but it didn't. It could have drugged me off. After all, I was a prepackaged meal. It just had to take me, but it didn't. I could have done anything. It could have done anything it wanted to me. Besides damaging a few personal items, i.e. coffee pot, stove, walking stick, etc., it did absolutely nothing to me other than scare the shit out of me. And for the one I never heard leave, that one got popped in the nose. I don't expect anyone to believe this. Okay, call me stupid. Even after all of that, I returned. No way. It still threw boulders and rocks at me. It did some occasional tree knocks and some hoots way off in the distance, but it never came back into my camp again. That's all I gave a shit about. I only know this because it used to come into my camp frequently. It would move stuff around, stack rocks, stack tree branches, take food I left out for it, and just do stuff. I could hear it sometimes though most times I didn't. It threw pebbles at my tent during the night, but I never looked outside to take a peek at it. I let it do its thing. God, they did scare the shit out of me that night, though. Again, whatever. Well, that's all I have to say about it. Take whatever way you want. I've had a weird life and really don't give a snot what you think. I kept going out there for another year or so until I moved back to the Midwest. End o email. That is one hell of a frickin' experience. I cannot believe you went back there. Like, who would have went back there? Not too many people. That's incredible. And terrifying. And from what I understand, and I listen to everyone, and I take from what each person's knowledge, I take what I feel I may need, or I leave the rest. That's what I'm doing on my private time. I have had more than a handful of people now expressing that we have dominion over these beings. I never gave it too much thought until not really fairly recently, but the past little while I've been listening to that a little more often and applying it to more of the knowledge and tidbits I get here and there and adding to my puzzle piece, and I'm starting to become more convinced that possibly we do have dominion over these beings. And that would explain the frustration they express to us when they cannot do much more than look at us with absolute disgust. Look at us with hatred, look at us like they'll want to, quote, rip us limb from limb, but they don't. Stomp back and forth, frustration, right? Sway back and forth, break things, shake the shit out of trees, push full-grown trees over, throw ridiculous-sized boulders at us. all sorts of examples of ridiculous strength and power. But on average, there's no pattern to them picking us up and flinging us like a boulder, or throwing a boulder on top of our buddy, or throwing a boulder on top of our pickup truck, which I would do all the time if I was one of them. I would be screwing people over left, right, and center just for fun if I was one of them, I would imagine. Maybe. Possibly, depending. Maybe if I could tell who was a bad person or not. Anyway, there you go, you guys. Take from what you will or leave it. That is one hell of a picture of that. Picture being in a tent and that description pressing down on the frickin' roof of your tent over your face. No, thank you, said everybody. Now, who's next? My first Sasquatch experience. Dear Steve, feel free to share my name, etc. My name is Lucy. I'm 22 years old, and I guess I can say I've had my first Sasquatch experience. I come from Scotland, and I live in the Loch Lomond area. Have I read this? Oops. Today, Monday, February 27th, I decided to take my 2-year-old German Shepherd. Yeah, I have read this. Sorry, I've read it. Here's another one. This is titled Incidents in Ohio and maybe a couple of puzzle pieces. Hi Steve, thank you again for all you're doing, and I hope you stay safe as I don't trust anyone in government these days. Keep your head on a swivel, my man. You too, and that's not a bad group to not distrust, obviously. I live in Ohio and we go camping a lot. I'm 61 now, but I still hunt, fish, hike, just about everything outdoors that my free time will allow. This could be a couple of my puzzle pieces that have come together after listening to all the stories you have shared with all of us. I told you about the roar/howl that woke me in the middle of the night in 2019 at Salt Fork, how can you tell it's dinner time? Salt Fork State Park. But these other two incidents were from years earlier, around 2003, 2005. My kids and I were camping along the Mohican River in the Mohican State Forest. Right on the river in tents in the middle of the summer, so there were other campers there too. But on this day, I seemed to be the only one around us as everyone else was kayaking or canoeing. Here's the weird part. My kids were off playing somewhere and I was just hanging around our site relaxing. Suddenly, some rocks began landing in the water near our side of the bank, and a few landed on the ground too. I could tell by the way they landed in the water that they were being launched from across the river up in the woods. The river is only waist deep, 25 yards wide, and across the river the woods were pretty thick. It goes up a pretty steep hill. Anyone or anything could be concealed quite easily. At the time I didn't think anything about it, except probably some kids being a-holes. I yelled for them to stop it, or else, and nothing else happened after that. So, that is one puzzle piece. The other time in the same area, but in the state park itself, we decided to go on a good long hike, about a mile or so, in a huge tree at the top of this pretty steep hill came crashing down about 50 yards away from us. It hadn't been wet or windy lately, so we all thought that was pretty strange. We didn't see anything or anyone, and I know trees fall in the forest all the time, so again I didn't think anything about it. I've not seen any of these beings and honestly don't care if I ever do. But after hearing the howls and putting these other two incidents together and hearing your shares, it seems like we could have been one of those forest people, or I have the good fortune of strange coincidences. Keep on doing what you do for everyone and keep getting the words out there, as it is much appreciated. I try to catch all your shares and envy your lifestyle. Feel free to use my name, as I don't give two shits about what anyone thinks. Best regards, Harry J. from Northeast Ohio. Thanks, Harry, man. Harry, man. Thanks, Harry, my man. The chances are you're going to have something else happen is pretty high. It's just the way it is. It's a pattern with whoever becomes aware of these damn things, these people. So, if you come across any new knowledge or any more experiences, make sure you keep us updated, alright, man? Be safe. Be safe. Appreciate your time you just donated to everybody through me. What's this one? This is going to be a New Yorker for sure. How do I know? Because it's titled Add Deer Ron Dax. Again. Dear Steve, I've been a subscriber to your YouTube channel for several years now, long before the Sabe stories began. And I finally decided to share my story after almost 30 years. I'm from Western Massachusetts. My name is Paul. And feel free to use my name. I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. In 1963, I was 8 years old and went on my yearly New York deer hunting trip with my dad and grandpa. This year was special because I was finally deemed old enough to hunt on my own. Grandpa and Dad were both descended from Crow and Canadian ancestry, among others, and Grandpa especially followed the old ways. Every deer season, everyone that had a non-resident license would team up and head to my Gramps' hunting camp deep in the Adirondack Mountains. Adirondack State Forest in northeastern New York. Excitement was always on the menu as we live in Western Massachusetts, where deer season is shotgun only. New York allowed rifles for deer. Ironically, I was toting an old J.C. Higgins 16-gauge bolt action that year, loaded with buckshot slug. Dad told me it would do the job if needed, probably to keep me from whining about not carrying a rifle. Before the naysayers object, I must tell you that back then it wasn't unusual for an 8-year-old or even younger to be allowed to go off on his own during deer camp. My, how the world has changed. No shit. But anyway, if you looked up the word remote in the dictionary, there'd be a picture of Gramps' hunting camp. There's a few hours drive by car, then about 5 or 6 miles on an old overgrown logging road by Doodlebug to get to the camp. For those who don't know, a Doodlebug is a stripped down old Ford Model T or something similar that we used back then for off-roading. Dad said I should feel privileged. They used to use horses to get in there. I loved that camp. It was a large one-room cabin with high ceilings and only one door and 2 windows, with a long meat pole connecting the cabin with the small utility shed and privy on the other side of that. That meat pole was usually full or close to it by the 2nd or 3rd day of the season. Grandpa usually sent me in the general direction of where he thought I'd have the best luck. And on the way back, I would double as a deer driver for anyone that stayed at the cabin. I left the cabin well before sunup and used an old D-cell flashlight, occasionally flicking it on and off to stay on the old overgrown logging road. And after about an hour or so, it was starting to get light out. Off to my left, I saw a sort of a meadow, tall grass with a huge rock in the middle, with a big maple growing up through it. At the edge of the field where I walked up, there was a stream, making a slow turn, barely flowing, a trickle, with a high bank right where it curved. To me, it seemed like the perfect place to sit with my back against the bank and watch the meadow. As I sat down and settled in, I kept thinking what a great spot this was. After the sun was fully up, I noticed that it had gotten quiet. No birds, no crickets, no morning sounds. And I remember thinking at that time, it was rather strange. And suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement, and in a split second, there he stood, maybe 15 feet away from me. That is so close, it's ridiculous. I don't know if it was because I was scared, or if what I'd been taught about being motionless while hunting made me just sit there and not move a muscle. I judged him to be around 10 foot tall plus. He had hair, not fur, all over his body except for his face and the palms of his hands. His arms hung past his knees and he swung them gently as he walked. As I watched, he came to an abrupt stop and squatted down into the tall grass. Now I could only see from his shoulders up, and he was angled slightly towards me. His face was human looking. He had some hair on his cheeks and chin, but not enough to classify as a beard. His lips were thin, and when he opened his mouth, his teeth were straight and stained yellow. His nose reminded me of a boxer who has taken many punches. The hair on his head was just past his shoulder length, and it looked as if his head was connected directly to his shoulders. No neck. His eyes reminded me of a deer or a cow. Big, hairy eyebrows, and no whites to his eyes that I could see, and very darkly colored. After what seemed like forever, he slowly turned his head and looked right at me. He gazed at me for what seemed like minutes, but in reality I think it was only a few seconds, as he kind of tilted his head from side to side as if saying, "Where the hell did you come from?" And immediately stood up, without making a sound. He made a beeline for the edge of the woods at the bottom corner of the meadow and took what seemed to me like enormous strides. 4 or 5 steps, and he was out the woods. He turned, glanced at me again, and then just disappeared into the woods. After he was gone, I took a minute to register what I had just witnessed and decided it was time to head back for the cabin. It seemed it took no time at all to make the return trip, as I was trying to sort out what I had just seen. When I got back, everyone was still gone, so I took advantage of the situation and had a cup of the cold leftover coffee while I kept trying to make sense of it all. What a treat. Not. LOL. Around noon, Grandpa, my Uncle Seth, returned, and I immediately told Grandpa what had happened. He didn't seem to be alarmed at all and just nodded his head from time to time as I explained what I had just witnessed. After a pause, he looked at me straight in the eye and told me that I had seen Oma. O-M-A-H. O-M-A-H. He explained to me that Oma was a member of an ancient tribe of people that had been living in these woods for many, many years, and it was a good omen that I had seen him. According to Gramp, these people were very shy and seldom were seen. He asked me if I noticed what color his eyes were, and I said, very dark brown. And he said, that's good. Then he explained that there were some Oma that had red eyes, and they could be violent. He then said that I shouldn't tell anyone about my experience because people would say I was crazy and wouldn't believe me anyway. And that was all he said. After we got home, I told my dad the story, and he told me the same story that Gramp did, almost word for word. I'm 67 now, a Navy vet, but I've been through more shit than your average Joe. I've hunted all my life, although mostly local, and have had a few odd things happen in the woods, but nothing that was as up close and personal as this was. I realized this happened many years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Sorry for typing the book. Thanks to you for all you do, especially for this channel to give us members of the Club of No Return a place to vent. I hope somehow that this story helps somebody out there, as it certainly helped me by finally getting this off my chest. Stay safe, watch your six, and keep your stick on the ice, Paul. That's a great act of kindness, Paul. Taking your time out of your life and donating it to everybody through me and sharing that experience. And when you said you remember like it was like yesterday, said every single one of us. Said every single one of us has had that experience or something similar. But there's a pattern. Maybe I'll point out the patterns that we can note in this one email. One important point to mention would be that it stopped dead when Paul looked at it, without looking at Paul. It stopped dead, and then it turned to face him. Right? There's a pattern. How the hell do they do that? How do they do that, right? Obviously their sixth sense, their intuition, whatever you want to call it, and I always say that same thing, it's on point. They are in tune with it, where we only somehow felt something or somehow feel something, right? They are in tune with it. They probably have their own word for it to describe that skill. So there's a pattern. It stopped dead when the human's eyes connected to it, without it seeing the eyes. There's a big pattern there with everybody. The description was bang on. Hair, not fur. There's a pattern in the description. How many people have said fur? Be honest. Kick all those pricks to the side that have been annihilating the truth from people for basically decades now. Kick them to the side. How often have we heard human beings describe it as hair? It wasn't fur, it was hair. There's a strong pattern, right? What else? It looked more human than not in the face. Said nearly everyone, right? Patterns, 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 patterns. Long arms, below the knees, moving fast, 10 feet plus this particular individual, not uncommon. It's all common patterns, so many of them. It's funny when you hear such a clear description, when somebody's seeing these things at 15 feet, whatever, and every single person says flat out, it had a man's face, teeth like ours, wide nose, and hair, not fur. And I think of how many of those, I know I'm getting a little repetitive about it, but it still makes me angry because of how many people who are brave enough to come forward, say in the last 50 years, and they're shut down with their honest descriptions by that same group of pricks. I'll bat my lip there, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, man, I thank you so much for sending that in. I absolutely appreciate it. Absolutely appreciate it. And send in more when you can if you hear of any more knowledge that we can benefit from, alright? I'm totally stoked that it helped you out too to get that shit off your chest. Just like it does tens of thousands of other people here in the same boat, right? It's a big crew, this crew, Club of No Return. New members being inducted non-stop. Alright, what do we got? Let's hear another one. I'm going to have to go in here pretty quick. Puzzle pieces in reply to Team Arizona and the Owlman on 25th February 2023 and the First Nations Superhero Ladies on the 27th February 2023. Alright. Steve, first, I'd like to extend my gratitude to you and all the brave people who share through you. This channel is a wealth of knowledge and a breath of fresh air to those seeking the truth. Is it ever? Thank you for the kind words, but it's only because of people like you, right? The past few years have made one thing very clear to me. All things are connected. It doesn't matter what topic leads you to this exploration of real history. Everything is connected. The lies and the truth. May our great Creator lead us all to truth and stand up for what is right. On to the puzzle pieces, in no particular order, but all responses to items addressed by Team Arizona, the Owlman, and Our Lady Superhero. It was expressed that mind speak requires physical attributes. This is interesting because if you look into haplogroups, you'll see that all haplogroups, save one, share one mitochondrial Eve. The only exception is haplogroup X, which is the indigenous peoples of North America. They have what is thought to be a mitochondrial mother of another source. Could this be the physical attribute required for mind speak? In my recent seeking endeavors, I have found that there is scientific evidence that what used to be called an aura, referred to as the biofield in science, is generated by our DNA and is a unique signature like a fingerprint. And this is how the forest people recognize tagged individuals. Is this how the forest people recognize tagged individuals? This biofield has been documented as having wireless transmission. Is this why the DNA parties, nose swabbing, of the past few years were required? Is this part of the digital ID in the works? There was a comment regarding certain First Nations peoples being extra vigilant with women and children when the forest people are noticed in that area. If the forest people protect feeble humans, is it possible that the presence of the forest people may mean that other entities are around, and it is best to be vigilant during those times? Another item related to haplogroup X is the percentage of missing people within this group. The exploitation of this group has been extreme since Europeans began to exercise power within North America. Between the Trail of Tears to the heartbreaking stories from Canada and the United States reservations to the discoveries of mass graves from long ago, there has to be something about this group that is special in ways we just don't know yet. In regard to the very large numbers of missing women and children, there are quite a few reasons, most of them man-made. By no means am I discounting their other entities doing what they will, but the numbers are massive, and most people are unaware of what our sleazy governments have been hiding for so long. Your lady superhero touched on it with her heartbreaking story, but that is only a portion of the desensitization process for the minions to be able to stomach the process. In order to disappear people, children, you must be made into a psychopath. This has been accomplished through curriculum, media, and the infiltration of faith-based institutions. You make monsters by feeding them atrocity and take away healing mechanisms. Stay with me here, I'll wrap this up shortly. For those unaware of the breadth of the organ transplant industry, this may come as a shock. Look at the island that was owned by the guy who didn't kill himself. Who visited? Yes, politicians, music and film industry types, but many, many scientists. Although there was sure to be, quote, blackmail, end quote, type activities happening, I'm not discounting that, why would someone like Stephen Hawking visit? He was paralyzed. Save maybe one pinky finger. Look at how many organ transplants people on these published lists have had. Look at them all. You'll not be able to unsee it. You've ever heard of this point to look at before? Did you know that fentanyl, outside of medical uses, isn't just for recreation? Did you know that if someone overdoses on it, that it primes their organs for transplant? What? No shit? Let me read that again. Did you know that if someone overdoses on it, that it primes their organs for transplant? There's an eyebrow raiser. I've never heard that before, and yeah, I'm going to look into that for sure. Did you know that China uses it on their people to do the same? Did you know that Narcan keeps someone alive just long enough to get them to the hospital? Did you know that ingredients to produce fentanyl were potentially on that train in Ohio? Undocumented people flowing into North America and an explosion of fentanyl are not coincidental. Why do some states and provinces make it so difficult to opt out of organ donation? Why is it now included in some of the small print in insurance or hospital admittance form? That shit. But anyway, I guess I better bite my lip right before we get a strike on the channel for talking about what should be getting talked about here. It's frustrating, man. It's frustrating the shit that's going on, but how do we solve it? We keep creating the good guy army anyway, right? We keep the honesty flowing, the facts flowing, encourage people to be brave and not scared, stand up for themselves, fight back, speak openly. Anyway, I better get going. I gotta eat some food. I'm getting kind of tired, and that's when my mouth can really start cutting loose. Saw a funny, not a funny, but kind of a sick meme the other day. You notice that if you follow what happened with that island, and then you see that woman, Ghislaine Maxwell, she's doing 25 years time for trafficking humans to no one. Go figure. Share my story, howtohunt.com. Get the voices out, get them heard, get yourself heard. Get this crap off your chest. Be brave, don't be afraid. Once you found this channel, you found your people, and they are in the millions here. They just are. So keep the group growing. Keep the truth flowing.